I don't know if you heard, but,
This one's gonna take you for a ride.
Oh my gosh!
Looks like Marvel back on the menu, baby!
He's cold, baby!
Behold, optic blast! Dreams don't die!
If you're not in the loop, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is a universally beloved fighting game among gamers both competitive and non, but especially competitive, let's be real, plus people who grew up with it at arcades as kids, and people with generally good taste. It's been a long time since it's been available on modern consoles, let alone a physical version that wasn't delisted 2 seconds later, expressly because of an acute mix of licensing issues and an unwillingness, particularly from the Marvel company, to embrace the game's heavy 90s bent reliant on characters they didn't have the ability to make movies with there for a while. But now, I guess since Marvel does have full ownership of all its characters, the fact their movies have dipped in cultural relevance, being propped up now by X-Men properties with the chips down on the Fantastic Four for the future as well, not to mention Capcom's own recent efforts to revive interest in their arcade legacy, Marvel 2, along with every single Marvel Capcom arcade game, are coming to Switch, PlayStation, and Steam this year in a collection that shares theming, branding, and contents with a similar Capcom arcade collection released back in 2022.
This is the part where I humble brag about being the #1 ranked Cyberbots player in the Switch version. Then sheepishly acknowledge it's purely because I'm the only sucker to have kept playing it past release month.
Now, due to past behaviors from Capcom, plenty of people assumed this high-profile fighting game collection, released with the express intention of preserving classic franchises, with little to no representation on modern platforms, served a double purpose as a testing ground for the possibility of new entries in these long-neglected series. But in an interview with Game Informer, Capcom producer Shohei Matsumoto responded to this query by saying, "We do not think this will necessarily increase the possibility of these series being revived. So yeah, don't hold your breath for Cyberbots 2.
Are you talking to me? Are you me? Yeah? Then yes. Oh.
It seems clear that the purpose of releases like CFC, the beat-em-up bundle, and the Capcom Arcade Stadium service is just to preserve the classic games that helped make Capcom as big as it is now, not to test the viability of new games and fan-favorite franchises. That said, the minor miracle it takes to do this for the Marvel games has to be another story, right? Like, yes, of course, those games should also just be preserved with robust training modes, online play, artwork, and document galleries, of course. They're iconic not just to Capcom, but gaming at large, especially in the context of the FGC and the arcade scene. But with the stars having aligned to get these games on modern platforms, and Marvel and Capcom's fortunes being in a suspiciously similar state now to how they were back when the first Marvel vs. games got... Marvel vs. Not to mention Marvel and Capcom's fortunes being in a suspiciously similar state now to how they were back when the first Marvel vs. games got made. That is to say, Marvel's wider brand being carried by a select few properties, with the company as a whole trying to shake off a reputation for bad movies, ill-received comics, and a burgeoning desire on their part to make big moves in the gaming scene that Capcom is enjoying a huge win streak in for a quantity of quality titles. History is cyclical, my friends. Again, with that in mind, how can a new Marvel vs. Capcom game not be on the cards right now? It has to be happening. Maybe not so soon, but before the decade's over for sure. Hold me to that.
And so, here am I, a big fan of both Marvel and Capcom, mainly off the back of MvC 2's impact, to tell you what I wish to see in this new MvC game I'm so convinced will happen. I'll cover 5 big subjects on this topic here: art direction, premise, staging, contents, and of course, characters.
Let's go crazy!
The first 2 MvC games were essentially a frugally made quid pro quo effort for both Marvel and Capcom's benefit, reusing lots of character sprites from past games, with stages and audio design doing the bulk of graphical showboating. So the art direction was eclectic, to say the least. I love it, but it's not the sort of thing one can replicate to the same effect via focused measures. MvC 3, on the other hand, was made from whole cloth and made use of a marvelously stunning cel-shaded pulp style with intense comic book framing. It's awesome. But if I'm being totally honest, it can feel a little dull at times. The tempered color choices mixed with the heavy black shading can make for an experience that doesn't look as fun as it feels most of the time. MvC Infinite style, if it can be said to have any, puts me in mind of a generic 2010s Marvel mobile game, complete with ISO 8 no less, and has done this underwhelming game's lasting legacy no favors. Even in this, the era of influencers and video essayists attempting to reclaim the reputation of literally everything the internet's ever given a sour rep. I don't think anyone wants a new MvC game that looks like Infinite. So having said all this, what do I wish to see from a new MvC in terms of art direction? Well, first off, I want something uncompromisingly pulpy like MvC 3, but I want to see it done with lively colors and 2D sprites. Not a mix of pre-existing sprites as in the first 2 games, no. Sprites made in this day and age for this particular game. Look at games like TMNT Shredder's Revenge from a couple years back, or Power Rangers Rita's Rewind World coming out this year even. Big companies with big name brands, especially those rooted in 90s nostalgia, know the power of well-crafted arcadey sprite art. Capcom's legacy is chock full of magnificent sprite art that's aged like the finest of wines. It would be so rad to see a modern Capcom fighting game put this style back to use. And that game being a versus title earns a bonus points in my book. And that title being a Marvel vs. Capcom game gives them all my money. MvC games don't always have a prominent story, but when they do, it's normally on the premise of worlds colliding due to some cosmic force or imbalance. Infinite's had the most, I don't want to say robust or even involved story, emphasis. There you go. Infinite's had the most emphasis on story of all the games so far. And its story wasn't the worst. In fact, it had some pretty fun ideas, but in execution, it felt a little paint by numbers. Naturally, I don't want a new game to retread old ground in the premise department. So no Infinity Gems, no Onslaught, no Galactus, no Ultron Sigma. Hell, wouldn't it be nice for once to see a game whose meta premise is to celebrate two universes utilize that premise narratively too? I mean, people have been going wild online in the wake of MvC Fighting Collection's reveal, especially over this key art of Ryu and Scott Summers recreating their handshake from X-Men vs. Street Fighter. It's like they're two close friends who haven't seen each other in a long time, just happy to be together again, and as excited as little kids to duke it out like old times. Why can't that be the premise? Maybe a benevolent organization or godlike character from either universe hosts a tournament just for fun and glory. No world or universe or universes ending event, just a party. And of course, some conflict is expected if there's more story going on sprinkled in every character's arcade run. So, just frame it as the villains being party poopers, like they're intruders and you have to fight them to go back to partying. It's not that hard, right? And I mean, there have to be limitless options for who and where the hosting could be done with this premise, from both Marvel and Capcom. But I have a particular choice that just so happens to include my favorite name in Marvel Comics. I won't say outright what I have in mind, but it has to do with citrus. Comment below if you know what I'm talking about. Anywho, while this premise is definitely more low stakes than previous games, I feel constantly trying to grasp at higher stakes in big, huge, universe-ending scenarios is just exhausting after a certain point. Look at a game like Pocket Fighter. It doesn't pit our heroes against unfathomable odds. It doesn't insist every fight is a matter of life and death. And it's adorable. It's endearing. It lets its hair down, says we're just here for a good time, so let's go wild, and so they do. Speaking of which, MvC has a wildly inconsistent history with its staging. The first game used locations from both universes and translated them fairly faithfully. The second used all new locations divorced from both universes, utilizing pre-rendered 3D assets. The third game did what the first game did, and each of Infinite Stages combined locations from Marvel and Capcom respectively, in a way that I would argue detracted from the unique appeal of both in most cases, leading them to feel like generic adaptations of either. I mentioned Pocket Fighter not too long ago as an example of the low-stakes fun crossover premise being done well, and a huge part of that comes from how jam-packed each stage is with cameos and references to multiple Capcom characters and properties. This is the exact template I want a new MvC game to follow for its stages. We can have a mix of Marvel and Capcom locations, entirely new locations, or even enhanced recreations of ones from previous games. But the thing that would give them a huge heaping helping of personality and appeal would be indiscriminately populating them with cameos from Marvel and Capcom together. Can't you just imagine a concert venue stage where Raptor's shredding guitar, Gwen Stacy's on drums, Bass is on bass, and Dazzler diegetically sings a vocal tune? Or how about a beachside stage, where Zangief and Juggernaut are having a muscular pose-off, Namor and Rico ride the waves, no surfboard required, and Sue Storm and Sally play volleyball while their stretchy-armed husbands keep the rally going indefinitely. And even aside from these overly saccharine suggestions, wouldn't it just make sense to see Captain Commando's team on Nowhere or Sword's headquarters? Or Elsa Bloodstone at any Resident Evil manor? Mephisto at Mackay? Hauser in the Savage Land? Slapstick and Garo Tornado at that one big clown head level from MvC 2? I could go on forever. MvC 3 made great use of cameos and character dialogue in arcade cinematics. Why not infuse that vibe further into the game's staging? And why stop at staging? In terms of content, of course you need local and online battles. Of course you need casual and ranked online battles with your choice of standby activity between bouts. Of course you need training mode. Of course you need arcade mode infused with that cameo-laden celebratory staging I've been going on about. And it would be quite apropos to have an in-game museum where, in addition to listening to the game's OST and viewing the cinematics from arcade mode as well as promo key and concept art, you can also learn about all these characters' origins and the significance of particular locations and whatnot via an extensive lexicon. It'd be even cooler, though not necessary, if previews of particular comics and demos of particular games where these characters originate from were available here too. Special unlockables like title cards and them aforementioned art pieces, lexicon entries, songs, and origin demos / previews would do wonders for single-player creeps like me. Additional single-player challenges like Heroes and Heralds from MvC 3, but not necessarily Heroes and Heralds from MvC 3, something similar would suffice, would also make me grin with contented cheeks. And finally, let's not kid ourselves, Capcom would almost assuredly roll out DLC and cosmetics for this game, so an in-game chop seems unavoidable. And bearing all this in mind, wherever possible, keep the celebratory theme en perpetuum et infinitum. I want this game oozing with cameo characters. I want the shortest videos in the search results for every cameo character in the new MvC game on YouTube to be 50 minutes long, minimum. And speaking of characters, the first two MvC games rosters are very odd to look at in retrospect, but that's a big part of why they're so beloved. Expected faces like Ryu and Spider-Man have been there the whole time, sure, but why Jin from Cyberbots? Why Shumagorath or Blackheart from the depths of Marvel continuity even for the time? Why the trifecta of OCs from 2 specifically? I don't know, but I love it! MvC 3's roster was made a little more deliberately and sports a roster many fans have appraised in retrospect as pretty well balanced, all things considered. And Infinite's roster is just objectively the least liked aspect of the game across the board. The Capcom representation felt secondary, and the Marvel representation was slanted entirely toward MCU promotion. And let's not even go into the whole characters are just functions comment. Ugh. Nah, the thing that everybody from competitive to casual, from long-timer to newcomer, from super nerd to never heard is going to be holding to the most scrutiny is the roster of playable characters. I think the best thing a new MvC game could do in terms of playable character selection is to evenly represent the following phenoms. For Marvel, you've got to have an even mix of famous faces, cosmic picks, X-Men, and wildcards. And for Capcom, an even mix of famous faces, contemporary stars, arcade stars of yesteryear, and literally who's. It would of course also be nice to see a healthy mix of returning fighters from across the series as well as newcomers from both brands, and it should go without saying, but please, keep an even number of both Capcom and Marvel combatants. We've had Capcom-heavy rosters, we've had Marvel-heavy rosters. Let's please, for fairness' sake, try and keep things even. Now, am I about to drop a full roster mock-up on you? List a top 10 or even 2 top 10s concerning combatants by both brands? I'm tempted. I truly am. I have all these things mapped out in other docs at time of writing this script, so I could share them now. But here's the thing. I have had a lot less time lately to make videos. I've got a life outside YouTube that demands my attention most of the time, so I don't know whether or not it'll be worth my time to go into character wish lists or roster mockups for a series I'm not even sure I have an audience for. So tell you what, I'll play a card out of Capcom's deck here and say if this video performs well, let's say that means 5,000 views in the first 2 weeks, or at least 50 new subscribers off the back of it in that same time frame. Then I'll prioritize doing a sequel to this video where I have a wish list of characters I want and a roster mockup. If we can hit that goal, I'll make it a priority, I promise.
But to conclude this video, Marvel vs. Capcom is back. And while I may be a bit too hopeful that it's back to give us something new in a few years' time, I'm perfectly content with the fact MvC 2 and the rest of the arcade titles are back this year. And soon we'll all be attempting to evade or pull off cheap combos in the comfort of our beds while breathing contented sighs as we remember the days when we barely understood how to pull off special moves at all, with a scant amount of quarters left in our gym short pockets and the promise of pizza looming over our heads, waiting at any minute to pull us away from a sky blue Venom's green slobbery smile. Oh man, I miss my hairline.